There are moments in a performer's life that glow forever: applause, bright lights, innocence captured on film. And then there are the moments they bury. Moments the audience never sees, moments too painful to revisit. For Hayley Mills, one of the most beloved stars of the 1960s, that moment lives inside a single television episode from 1961, an episode she refuses to watch to this day. And to understand why, you have to step back into the whirlwind she was caught in, behind the Disney sparkle and worldwide fame. Hayley Mills was born into British artistic royalty on April 18, 1946. Her father, John Mills, was one of England's most respected actors. Her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, filled their London home with novels, scripts, and endless creativity. Hayley grew up surrounded by costumes, stages, and the quiet hum of rehearsal rooms. Storytelling wasn't just a profession in her family, it was the air they breathed. By 11, she stepped into that world herself with her debut in Tiger Bay. What she delivered wasn't the performance of a child, it was raw, instinctive, and startlingly honest. Critics praised her as a natural talent, and the BAFTA she earned for Most Promising Newcomer marked a turning point. Childhood and stardom collided, and there was no turning back. Then came Disney. Walt Disney Studios saw something magical in the shy British girl with the clear eyes. And in 1960, when she starred in Pollyanna, Hayley became an international sensation. Her warmth, optimism, and effortless charm won over audiences instantly. But the praise came with pressure: interviews, rehearsals, and a schedule so full it would exhaust an adult, let alone a 14-year-old. And just as Pollyanna transformed her into Hollywood's brightest young star, The Parent Trap pushed her even further. Playing twin sisters required double the work, double the emotional energy, and double the time in front of the camera. Walt Disney adored her. The world adored her. But Hayley Mills was still just a child, expected to carry a studio on her small shoulders. This is where the story of the forbidden episode begins. In 1961, while The Parent Trap was turning her into a household name, the studio added another task to her already impossible workload: a small, seemingly harmless television appearance. To everyone else, it was routine. Quick, simple, and easy. For Hayley, it became the moment she would never want to relive. During that period, she wasn't just tired, she was drained to the core. Early mornings blurred into long nights. Makeup chairs felt endless. Scenes repeated until she couldn't tell if her smile was real anymore. She later admitted, "I didn't understand what it meant to be in the public eye. I only knew I couldn't let Walt down. I couldn't let my parents down. I couldn't let the crew down." By the time she stepped onto that television set, she was emotionally frayed. Inside, she felt overwhelmed, anxious, and unsure of herself. Photos from the shoot reveal what she tried to hide: tension behind her eyes, a stiffness in her posture, a fragile exhaustion no lighting could disguise. Years later, she said quietly, "I can see that I wasn't well. I was exhausted. I was anxious. I was just trying to survive the day." That is the real reason she refuses to watch the episode. Not because the story was weak. Not because her performance was flawed. But because watching it means returning to a moment when fame felt less like a blessing and more like a machine swallowing her whole. She felt unprepared for the emotional tone the script required. She didn't feel talented enough, mature enough, or strong enough to deliver what people expected from her. And for a child praised endlessly for perfection, the fear of being not good enough became unbearable. Even now, she says hearing her own younger voice from that episode makes her chest tighten. What haunts her most is the contrast. At the very same time she was filming that painful appearance, she was also delivering one of the most joyful performances of her career in The Parent Trap. Audiences saw a radiant, confident young star. They had no idea how much she was silently carrying. And that is why that small 1961 episode remains locked away in her past, unwatched, untouched, and unforgettable for reasons the world will never fully see. To Hayley, that contrast became unbearable. Her Disney persona, the cheerful, polished, endlessly perfect girl, had started to feel like a mask she wore for everyone else. And that small TV episode captured the exact moment she felt herself slipping behind it. That is why she will never watch it. Because to her, it isn't entertainment. It's a diary entry. A snapshot of a young girl drowning silently in expectations she never asked for. Some memories belong to the public. Others belong only to the heart. Over the years, fans have asked about the episode. Interviewers have approached carefully. But Hayley's answer never changes: soft, grateful, and firm. Some things don't need to be relived. And that one is better left where it is. If the early 1960s crowned Hayley Mills as Hollywood's most beloved young star, the years after forced her into an adulthood shaped by pressure and scrutiny. The world saw a bright girl with a golden career. But behind the scenes, she was navigating storms that tested her spirit and reshaped her identity. The Parent Trap made her a legend. It also taught her that fame is a double-edged sword. Audiences adored her innocence. Studios depended on it. And as she grew older, that image became harder to carry. By the late 1960s, Hayley was transitioning into adulthood, a phase that most people experience quietly. Her journey, however, unfolded under bright studio lights. Every doubt, every mistake, every moment of vulnerability was visible. Yet she kept moving, determined to prove she wasn't frozen in time as Disney's eternal child. Her transformation truly began with A Family Way in 1966, her first significant adult role. On that set, she met director Roy Bolting, a man 33 years older, confident, experienced, and deeply established in the film world. Hayley was 20, still discovering who she was beyond the role she played. Their connection surprised everyone, including her. But in a life defined by pressure, Roy offered steadiness and direction. For a time, that was enough. They married in 1971. Their life together blended the creative energy of London's Chelsea district with the tranquility of a restored windmill in Buckinghamshire. It was elegant, artistic, and reflective of two very different worlds trying to fit together. But age gaps rarely stay quiet. What felt grounding in her 20s became restrictive in her 30s. Slowly, they drifted apart. By 1977, the marriage dissolved, leaving behind respect, memories, and a quiet sadness that time could not fully soften. From that chapter came her first son, Crispian Mills, a child raised in a home shaped by creativity. He would later become the frontman of Kula Shaker, blending psychedelic rock with Indian influences. His imagination was inherited, not taught. After the marriage ended, Hayley moved into another deeply emotional chapter, her relationship with actor Lee Lawson. Charismatic and thoughtful, he brought passion and intensity into her life. Together they welcomed their son Jason. And though their romance did not last, their shared devotion to parenting became an anchor for Hayley during a period when she needed grounding more than applause. Motherhood changed her. Fame had sharpened her edges, motherhood softened them. She no longer needed to be perfect. She only needed to be present. And in that shift, she rediscovered the parts of herself buried beneath years of pressure, expectations, and spotlight. Her career matured alongside her personal life. In the 1980s, she gravitated toward roles that required depth, vulnerability, and emotional honesty. The Flame Trees of Thika showcased a calmer, more grounded Hayley, an actress who no longer relied on youthful charm but on wisdom. She built a thoughtful body of work through television dramas and ensemble films, selecting roles that felt true to who she was becoming, not who Hollywood believed she once was. When she appeared in Appointment with Death in 1988, she didn't chase the spotlight. She simply added her presence with quiet strength, contributing to the ensemble with grace rather than urgency. As the years passed, Hayley embraced the rare privilege of choice. She appeared when she wanted, not for fame, but for meaning. In the 2000s and 2010s, she surfaced occasionally, bringing warmth to Foster and emotional honesty to the drama Moving On. Her performances were deliberate, gentle, and dignified, reflecting a woman who had learned to protect her peace. Yet even as her life expanded, the memory of that single television episode never faded. It followed her, not as shame, but as a reminder of who she once was. A young girl who didn't know how to say no. A child terrified of disappointing adults she trusted. A teenager praised for perfection when she was barely holding herself together. The episode captured all of that before she even had the language to explain it. While she revisited many early roles with affection, her optimism in Pollyanna, her charm in The Parent Trap, that one episode remained untouched. Not because it was embarrassing. Not because it revealed anything scandalous. But because it showed something painfully true, a child on the brink of emotional collapse. She once described it as opening a door I keep locked for a reason. The pressure she carried, wanting to make Walt Disney proud, wanting to live up to her father's legacy, wanting to meet the expectations of millions, left invisible marks on her spirit. And that episode preserved those marks like an unintentional time capsule. It didn't capture the actress. It captured the child beneath the actress. A child who was tired. A child who was scared. A child who was trying not to break. And even now, after decades of success, awards, and admiration from fans who cherish her legacy, that memory remains sealed and sacred. Hayley understands the curiosity. She knows audiences see her childhood as a golden era of cinematic magic. But she also knows that magic casts shadows. And some shadows are not meant to be explored. Because that single episode represents something deeper than a forgotten TV appearance. It represents the moment she first felt the price of fame. The moment she realized she could be adored yet overwhelmed. The moment she understood that the world wanted the star, even when the girl inside was struggling to breathe. It was a private fracture in an otherwise brilliant life. And that is why she leaves it untouched.
Not out of bitterness. Not out of shame.
But out of compassion. Compassion for the younger self who didn't yet know how to breathe beneath the weight of the world. That same compassion shaped the final chapter of his life, a chapter that began quietly, far from the noise that once defined him. No cameras, no crowds, no flashing lights, just a still room where time finally slowed enough for him to face the one thing he had always outrun, the truth of who he had been, who he had become, and who he still hoped to be before the curtain closed for good. The world celebrated him as a legend, a trailblazer, a man who shattered the rules and reshaped culture with the force of his voice. But in those dim, reflective hours, he didn't see the icon people worshipped. He saw the kid who once stood on a cracked street corner with nothing but anger and raw talent holding him together. He saw the man who had lost friends, trust, and years, sometimes through his choices, sometimes through betrayal. Fame always looks polished from the outside, but memory strips it down to bone. In those silent moments, he wasn't a myth. He was a man confronting decades of ghosts.
And he faced them one by one.
The choices that wounded people he cared about.
The fights he should have walked away from.
The deals he should have refused. The words he hurled in youth that grew sharper with time. But he also saw the victories, the records that shook a generation awake, the performances that echoed through living rooms, the unapologetic honesty that gave countless people courage. He was never just the fire, he was the furnace, shaping something far larger than himself. As he moved through his memories, he revisited the people who braided themselves into his story. The early collaborators who believed in him when he was nothing but potential. The actors who trusted him to carry their characters into the world. The musicians who depended on his instincts and clarity. The friends who weathered storms with him, and the ones who vanished when the winds changed. He didn't blame any of them anymore, not even the ones who hurt him. Time softens anger into understanding, not forgiveness exactly, but something gentler. In that softness, he found a peace he had never known. The turning point came the day he returned to the place he had avoided for years, his old neighborhood. Part of him feared it would break him, another part believed it might close a wound left open too long. When he stepped out of the car, the air carried the same scent he remembered: asphalt, dust, hunger, the kind of hunger only kids from forgotten blocks understand. The streets were worn now, some buildings newly painted, others abandoned, but the energy, restless, raw, alive, was unchanged. A group of teenagers recognized him. Their faces didn't light up because of fame. They saw a survivor. A man who walked the same broken sidewalks they walked, and somehow made it out alive. They didn't ask about awards or movies. They asked about survival. About rising when everything around you insists on dragging you down. He answered with a clarity forged from pain and discipline. He told them to guard their talent, to stay focused, to fight for who they wanted to be. And he told them the truth nobody likes to admit: it's not the world you're fighting, sometimes it's yourself. That moment shifted something inside him. For the first time in years, he remembered why he started. Not for fame, power, or applause, but to breathe, to express, to survive. That night, he walked straight into his studio, the only room that had ever felt like both sanctuary and battleground. The equipment was newer, sleeker, but the energy hadn't changed, the hum of possibility, the quiet before creation. He placed his hands on the mixing board and stood there for a long moment, letting the room speak back to him. Then he pressed record. What came out wasn't rebellion or rage. It wasn't the voice of youth or the fire of defiance. It was the truth, raw, unpolished, vulnerable. He spoke of loss, time, legacy, and the high cost of becoming larger than life. When he finished, he didn't listen back. He didn't need to. He knew he had captured the final piece of himself. But the world wasn't finished with him. A documentary team approached him soon after, asking not for the headlines or myths but for the real man beneath them. At first, he refused. Too many memories felt too fragile. But eventually, something shifted. Maybe age, maybe wisdom, maybe the desire to leave behind more than just art. When the cameras rolled, he spoke with the same unflinching honesty that shaped his career. He didn't hide the ugly parts or polish the sharp ones. He told the truth, every part of it, and in doing so, reclaimed his story from decades of speculation. The world responded with gratitude. Older fans saw their own battles reflected in his. Younger fans found guidance in his scars. The documentary became more than a film, it became a map, a lesson, a mirror. And in its final scene, as he walked alone through an empty theater, stage dark, echoes fading, he finally understood what legacy truly meant. Legacy wasn't applause.
It was impact.
His story didn't end with downfall, regret, or tragedy. It ended with truth. With clarity. With the quiet dignity of a man who had lived fiercely and fully. When he stepped outside that quiet theater, the sky melting into gold, he took a long, steady breath. And for the first time in decades, he felt the weight lift.
He felt peace.
The legend continued. But the man finally rested.